This is the Brisbane Lions Fancast with Dom Fay and Michael Whiting.
Yes, a bit of a special edition of the Fancast today, Mike. We're going to be having a bit of a post-season review, a bit of a chat about some of the list changes, a look towards the club champion, and also a bit early in the year, but there is a bit of trade talk going around that we're going to touch on too.
It's special because it's just me and you talking, Dom, so we'll give everyone the heads up right now.
But yes, we will be joined by a few key off-field personnel from the club in the coming weeks and months. But for this episode, this is just you and I having a bit of a look back. So I think we should probably start on the season that has been 2014. Obviously wrapped up Saturday night in, well, I wouldn't say very disappointing fashion against Geelong. As soon as Rockcliffe and Zorko are out, you knew the wins are not going to happen here, most likely. And there were some positive signs. Probably ultimately summed up what the year was, I think, in the some positive signs. But, we're still obviously some way from being where we're hoping to get.
Yeah, I reckon you're right. I think Saturday night was a good summation of the season. I thought it was a pretty good performance, all things considered. You have arguably two of your three most informed, two of your foremost. I'm expanding this group all the time with Steph Martin and Pierce Hanley, but Rocky and Zorko have been in that group of players that have been in super form in recent weeks. So to lose those two basically on the day of the game was a huge setback, and it was always a big task to start with. So, but there was enough promise there. It wasn't a poor performance by any stretch. I think they showed enough, and we knew Geelong was going to be hard to stop their ball movement so quick. I thought Brisbane were pretty good. The scoreboard doesn't look too flattering, but pretty good, and I thought summed up the season well. Lots of encouragement, quick ball movement, able to score goals. I thought it was not a bad finish to a very encouraging season.
Yeah, I think it was early in the third quarter the margin got back to about 10 points. So, I mean, it just blew out a bit from there. And I mean, that was always a good chance of happening with such a young side in the last game of the year. So, nothing bad to come out of that game, and quite a few positives, which is good. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here, Mike. On school ranking systems from A+ to E-.
Oh, here we go.
Where do you rate the Lions season?
Dom likes to throw the curly ones at me with no notice. So, it is really tricky. I mean, I'd probably go sort of in that C+ B- type of bracket.
It is tough because you're not just looking at measure of wins.
No,
not
at all.
Expectations and
that's
and
what you've
everything.
That's what you've got to weigh up against. I think if we looked at the start of the season, what the expectations were. They probably weren't too high. I would have thought maybe around about this mark, and then that would have plummeted significantly early in the season when the big injuries to Daniel Rich and Matthew Leuenberger came in. Hanley was injured early, Merritt was suspended early. There was a lot of circumstances that would have changed those expectations quickly purely on a wins basis. So, I mean, the more I think about it as I'm talking here, I probably think more into that sort of B- category. The bottom line is it was 7 wins. You're not going to mark the season too highly on 7 wins, but against the expectations and against the really poor cards the Lions were dealt, I think it was far and away a pass mark. So, all things considered, a good season.
I'm a little more bullish on the year than you in terms of my review. I'm giving us a B+, and that I should make it clear that's B+ by around year 10 standards. We're not quite in the year 12 category yet. B+. I was
going to say, mate, there'll be a lot of teams probably in the 8 that don't give their teams B+, but I guess that's the...
Yeah, look, I've got a reason for B+. It's not just something I pulled out of nowhere. At the start of the year, I think even in the first Fancast we did, I said that there were 3 things I wanted to see this year, 3 aims for 2014. The first was... after what had happened over the off-season, a happier and more united club, and I think that's a definite check.
Big tick for that.
Second one was some promising signs from the new draftees to suggest that maybe the go-home 5 won't hurt us too much long-term, and I think that's above and beyond promising signs.
That's a tick.
And the third one was glimpses from some key position players, particularly up forward where we've been lacking for a while. Another tick there. So in terms of what I guess I went into the season hoping for, expecting, or things like that, I think a B+ is where we've ended up. I mean, we haven't found necessarily the next key forward, but we found a few people who could be potentially the next key forward. So, there's been a lot to like this year, and what is encouraging is that it's probably really strong foundations for the future are very clear now.
While the team was dealt a few bad cards with those injuries early in the season, I guess it opened the door for a few extra young players to get their chance, didn't it? Justin Leppich was always going to play a lot of kids this year for any number of reasons. He knows, and the club knows where the list's at. They're not contending for finals at the moment. They have to get games into younger players, so he was always going to do that. But then when the injuries came along, he was forced to do it even more. So we probably got a chance to see a couple of those forwards a bit more than we thought. Once Jonathan Brown retired, that opened up a permanent spot for a Michael Close or a Jono Freeman late to get 4 games off the top of my head that Jono played late in the season. And a Daniel McStay, who maybe sort of early to midway through the season didn't look like getting a game just this year, he got a few. So I guess we got those glimpses. Out of the adversity with the injuries came the opportunities, which is a bit of a cliche, and it's what coaches and clubs always sprout, but we saw a perfect example of why it's not just a cliche and why it's the reality. Is that we saw plenty of good glimpses, and Taylor and Aish have been spoken about a lot, but with good reason, and so has Darcy Gardner. But those other guys that we saw glimpses of, Cutler a few games here and there, Dan McStay a few games, Nick Robinson a couple, although he went off the boil the last few that he played. But we saw enough from a lot of those guys to be optimistic for next year and more particularly probably 2 or 3 years' time. Yeah,
no, I completely agree with you on that. I think also improvement from a few other players on the field. So I think for the majority of the season, he did trail off towards the end of it, but Marco Paparone had a very improved year for the most part. I did think Rowan Buick really stepped up and after being out of favour with Leper early in the year, he wasn't in his original plans, I don't think. I think that was pretty clear. But he worked his way right back into that team. A player you probably think had a bit of a case of the second-year blues, but likely to bounce back was Sam Mays. I thought, we saw a lot from him year one. This year, learning a few different roles.
Really difficult year for Sam, wasn't it? Like a player I think we're both massive fans of. And last week I had to write a review on the club and had to pick a most disappointing player for the year. It's obviously, that's a difficult job. But I'll tell you, Sam was very, very close to getting my nod there. But he is only a second-year player. And he was, as you just touched on, thrown a number of different roles. It was a bit of an educational year for him. He had to play down. He had to play at half back. I mean, Sam Mays wouldn't have played defence for I don't know how long. He's a ball getter and a great ball user. So that was a great education. He had to play on the wing. He had to play in the midfield. He played half forward. Really difficult year, but I don't think that'll do him any harm at all.
No, not at all. I think it is interesting when you hear on the footy shows the Lions spoken about, and they do mention, Rich, Redden, Rockcliffe, obviously, and add in Aish and Taylor and Zorko, and these players. Mays is the one that they often leave off. Now, we're talking about a player who some experts rated him, in the top 1 or 2, talent available in his draft year only a few years ago. So, I think I don't think it'll be too long until Sam Mays is firmly back on, I guess, a few people's agendas when they realise that, even though he's had a bit of a down year, he's a very talented player.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm certain we'll see close to the best of Sam Mays again next year once. And I mean, Leper's probably trying to educate him and teach him a few new roles and also find out where his best position is. Like he'll now know whether he wants to use him on a wing or a half forward that can, the new term of footy, the high half forward that can start at half forward and move towards the midfield and run up and back. I guess he'll know that now, and that'll be up to Sam Sam has to step up next year, but I'm sure he will.
So a number of positives to come out of the year. If you had to pick one major positive for you, I know everyone talks about their highlights, but I'm more interested, I guess, in the major positives. Was it, with the young key position players? Was it potentially the draftees? Was it the ruck? Well, is there one particular positive that you think that you thought was the standout?
I think on a big picture scale, I think you can ball this all up together, the retention of players and the culture at the club. I think that was a massive issue at the end of last year for all sorts of reasons. But with a number of the kids, not just the kids, but a few of those sort of second-tier players re-signing and showing their commitment to the club long-term, and just the fear. And you talked about wanting a happy club and the culture being back, and I think that's you can't put a price on that when you're starting from scratch, which basically the Lions were after those 5 kids left at the end of last season. You're starting from scratch, and you don't get that feeling at the club anymore. Everyone there is happy. Everyone knows the direction they're heading, and they got some new staff in. The Lions learnt lessons from the end of last year and implemented ways to make sure that didn't happen again. So I think, big picture, that's the biggest tick for me.
Yeah, for me, I'd probably say, and this is more not so much a big picture one, but more just on an excitement level, the emergence of the Mozzie squad. I think for a number of years, people did say the Lions looked pretty slow, and I think people thought that maybe they didn't look too exciting. And now, the addition of Lewis Taylor to Josh Green and Dane Zorko, and suddenly, we have one of the most exciting attacking weapons in the competition in the 3 of them. And I think there'll be many years that there'll be exciting fans to come. Now, there were a few list changes that have already been made that we should touch on. From the senior list, James Polkinghorne, Patrick Weedon, Andrew Rains and Jordan Lyle obviously delisted. And from the rookie list, Nicholas Hayes, Sam Michael and Isaac Conway also let go. Obviously always sad to see players go, particularly someone like Polkinghorne who had a number of years at the club. Obviously left with some great highlights, probably never quite achieved his potential, but that's just the reality of this time of year.
It is. Yeah, the players get cut every single year from every single club. So that's the reality. And there was no major surprises in there for me. Andrew Rains had 5 years at the club and built himself up to be probably one of the better taggers in the competition, I think. Wasn't really the role that Lepper saw him in this year. Had to go away and try and learn a bit more of an offensive role. Learnt that, came back, played a few games, wasn't quite in the direction of the club he wants to play on. He's keen to get a role somewhere else. At 28, there might be a club or two that have a look at him. We don't know that just yet. There is the odd club out there looking for experienced midfielders, and Rainsy is super professional, probably no more professional player at the club, so he probably does have some value. Whether he can fit in, I guess only time will tell. Polk's similar type of boat. He's been at the club 7 years, just short of 100 games, which was a shame for him.
Let's hope he doesn't have a superstar kid.
I always wonder that, Dom. I wonder, would it be worthwhile of playing him for 6 more games? He's on 94.
You never know.
Look at John O'Brien. John O'Brien wouldn't have been at this club if his dad played 3 less games or 2 less games. So funny the way things pan out. But Polk's probably never quite had the confidence in himself, I think. He never quite knew how good he was and didn't have the confidence to back himself to the full. So a shame, but he had his chances. Same with Geordie Lyle. I think he had his chances as well. Unfortunately, 3 years, 6 years in the system, all up, probably had some chances. And you think overtaken by the young fellas this year, or how do you see Geordie Lyle? He's a bit of he sort of divides opinions a little bit. Some people think he didn't get enough chances.
I think he probably got enough chances at senior level. I think maybe the bigger issue was that we only really realised probably after Brown retired just how important it was probably for young key forwards to develop and show something at senior level that they were the main target or had a go at being one of the main targets at least. I mean, when we did have Brown, he obviously commanded the majority of the ball. So, I mean, I guess I would have liked to maybe have seen Lyle with a few more games as the main key forward.
Post Brownie sort of.
Yeah, because he did show a few signs when he did play that role. I think Fremantle over in Perth last year, he had a great game when he was the main key forward. Geelong, obviously, last year, round 23, he had a good game as the main key forward there. So potentially, but, at the end of the day, it just didn't quite work out. And also, I think when we're talking about these players, we should also talk about a few players who probably quite well could have been on this list, but have, I guess, earned themselves new contracts.
There's probably 3 or 4, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that stand out are, you could even throw Matt Maguire in that mix, but
absolutely,
alongside him...
you could throw him in there, I think, yeah.
Well, alongside him, there's Rowan Buick, there's Jack Crisp, and obviously Stephen Martin. And the 4 of them, at the start of the year, you would be forgiven for thinking maybe they're in their last season.
Probably halfway through the year for all of those guys, I think. We've spoken about Steph Martin nearly every week. Matt Maguire was in the same... He was playing reserves and expected the only way he was going to get back into the seniors was as a forward second ruck. It was an unusual sort of move early in the season, but he looked gone as well. Came back, got his chance through a number of circumstances and made the most of it. Rowan Buick, you touched on him. Jack Crisp. I mean, these guys were all probably 3 months ago thinking, or we were thinking, and they were probably thinking that it could have been there last year, but you got to take your hat off to those guys, don't you? When you're in that position and you get given a chance and you grab it with both hands, that's what we love about footy.
Yeah, absolutely. They've all well, maybe Matt Maguire only has a year or two left in him at his age, but they all have suggested they have a fair bit more to contribute to the club, and particularly in a few cases that they're a big part of the club going forward. I mean, Steph Martin has gone from possibly down near the bottom of the list to probably top 3 players at the club now, which is a remarkable recovery. And really, I mean, we've spoken about it at length. Really, we couldn't touch on it enough. I mean, what a remarkable recovery it has been. Now, just before we move on to a bit of trade talk that's been going around, which I'm sure you can't wait to get into.
Oh, I love it.
We should probably give our club champion predictions, I think, because obviously that is Friday night at the Convention Centre this year at South Bank. Now, I think most people probably believe Tom Rockcliffe, this is the year he'll take it out, his second one.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's hard to see it going any other way, isn't it? He's just so consistent, Rockcliffe. Even in the matches where Brisbane's getting smashed, Rocky's often been head and shoulders the best player, so it's hard to see anyone beating him. He doesn't just shine in the wins, he does it in the losses as well, so it's hard to see anyone going past him, because that's best and fairest rewards consistency, and that's Tom Rockcliffe to a T.
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting awards, or most interesting awards on the night, will be best first-year player. That's almost more hotly contested this year than the
it is.
There's
a lot
champion.
of candidates, isn't there?
There absolutely are. I mean, many would say probably Louis Taylor, but you just don't know how the club rates things internally. Darcy Garden has every chance at that award.
I agree with you totally. When it's an internal voting system like that, and obviously we're externally looking in, and Darcy Garden's done a terrific job in his first year, but I guess we don't mark the same as coaches. They're looking at whether they're looking at his defence first and foremost, and then his ability to run off, or whether they're looking for the combination. We don't know exactly what they're looking for, but I think you're right. I would not be shocked if he was very, very close, if not sneaking it.
Yeah, no, me neither at all. So that would be very interesting to see how.
I don't think he will, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, no, I think it probably will be Taylor. Wouldn't be shocked if it was Aish, but also wouldn't be shocked if it was Gardner. I think probably more so than the Rising Star, which obviously pays more attention to the standout performances on field and things like that. You know, those three off field, there'll be a fair bit more taken into consideration.
I think Taylor might sneak the first year player. I think he's had a terrific consistent season as well, and we know a couple of those guys. Well, Louis played every game. I think Aish missed one, and Gardner didn't miss many once he came into the team early in the season. And I think those guys will even poll well in the best and fairest, just because they were consistent as well.
Absolutely. You wouldn't be shocked to see all three of them potentially, but particularly someone like a James Aish or a Lewis Taylor, you know, end up in the top 10, which if it does happen is remarkable for a first-year player.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think they will actually.
Yeah, which would be very interesting to see. Now we should move on. This is much earlier than you normally get trade talk, Mike. It is funny though, because only a few weeks on last year, we were sitting here hearing all this talk about all these players who wanted to leave. Look forward 12 months. Apparently all these players want to come to the Lions now, Mike. I don't know what's going on here. Look, we'll go through a few of these one by one. I'll run. So obviously you've had your year. I mean, there's not a lot that we can say about a lot of these because there's not a lot known at the moment. But the most recent one is probably Paddy Ryder, which came a bit out of nowhere. I think it was a Channel 7 journo down in Melbourne. Broke the story that Paddy Ryder's looking at moving to the Lions, that he's had talks with the Lions, very informal talks obviously, but some kind of talks.
Be interesting having talks when your team's playing a final this week, isn't it? But
very odd, but I think I'd say the majority of Lions and Essendon fans, their reaction to that was kind of a what?
Shaking your head there. Dom's still shaking his head now.
Look, I completely rate Paddy Ryder as a player, but if there's one position that the Lions really don't need someone in right now, I would have thought it's the ruck.
It's bizarre, and in all honesty, it's not trying to dodge the issue here, but I don't know a lot about where this Paddy Ryder rumours come from, whether it's got any legs or whether it hasn't, or whether his managers involved here somehow, but he's still got 2 years. I guess the facts we know, he's got 2 years on contract left at Essendon. So any of these players we're about to talk about, what needs to happen? They need to get traded. They need to be a trade to the club. I'm with you. It seems illogical to me. I mean, perhaps Paddy's decided that he wants to come to Brisbane. That's something I don't know whether that's true or not, but it does seem unlikely. I'd be highly, highly surprised if Brisbane were after Paddy Ryder. We know he's had a terrific season, probably his best season as well. But I think with the ruck stocks of Matthew Lornberger, Stephen Martin, who's just been given a new 2-year contract, Matthew Lornberger, who is thought of enormously at the club, unbelievably highly,
and you still got Trent
West in the wings as well.
Yeah.
So I'd be shocked if that happened. Absolutely shocked.
Look, I mean, the only part of the rumour that makes some sense is there is another Essendon player who's been linked to the Lions on and off for a number of years, Courtney Dempsey. Now, Courtney Dempsey and Paddy Ryder, I believe, are pretty close friends. Now, if there was perhaps some kind of a move of Courtney Dempsey, potentially it makes sense, but even then, you're kind of clutching at straws.
If you're the club, do you want Paddy Ryder? Not do you want Paddy Ryder, it's probably, of course you want Paddy Ryder, but it's not just do you want him, you've got to give up something for him.
Of course. Look, it doesn't really make sense with the way our list is at the moment, which is what I'd say. I mean, unless there is some hidden plan that we don't know about to trade a ruckman, which would shock you because, as you said, Leuenberger is considered so highly and Martin has just penned a new 2-year deal.
And I don't think, sorry to cut you off, Dom, I don't think Paddy Ryder's good enough to play as a key forward, so I'll just put that on the table right now. If people are thinking of using him as a key forward, he's handy, that's about it. Justin Leppich said on Saturday night after the loss against Geelong that the Lions would be targeting A-grade talent. Paddy Ryder is A-grade talent, but not if you're going to use him as a forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Another player who has kind of come on the radar, this is more rumour stage than anything official yet, but Sam Reid. From the Swans. Now, there's been less talk on this. It seems to me maybe more just people adding 2 and 2 together and getting their own conclusion.
I'm a bit with you, Don, actually. I think people look at that and go, hang on, Sydney's got Tippett, Franklin. Gee, maybe Sam Reid wants to be the main man somewhere else.
He's still got, 2 or 3 years left on his contract?
2 years on his 5-year deal as well. So that'd be very interesting. What if we're going to go the schoolyard method again, what grade is he? I don't think he's an A-grader by any stretch.
Certainly
very handy.
Not yet. I mean, he's probably shown that he maybe and mostly against the Lions, has shown that he might have the potential to be an A-grader. But, I mean, if we're talking about bringing 1 or 2 elite players of the competition into the club, I'm not sure Sam Reid quite fits that bill, and I'm not sure, again, similar to Paddy Ryder, that Sam Reid would probably be worth what we'd have to end up paying for him.
Oh, I'm with you, exactly. I'm not going to elaborate on that because I agree with you totally.
Then there's the big story, Mike. This is the real A-grade talent, and this is the one that probably, I certainly think, has the most legs. It circulates around Dane Beams. Now, this has been spoken about for a number of years. Obviously, his brother plays at the Lions. He's
nice,
from
cozy
Queensland.
connection.
Yeah, it did make sense on paper, and so it's been spoken about on and off for a while. But this off-season seems to have ramped up just a little bit. There's been talk about it in a lot of the media circles. I think it was even mentioned during the Lions-Cats game in the commentary on Saturday night. So it's there's something perhaps interesting there, but again, you look at the logistics. He's still got a year to go in his contract. He won't even be a free agent then. Collingwood, if we wouldn't... I just want to put this up before I ask your opinion on this. Last year, Lions fans at the moment are saying we'll trade pick 4 for Dane Beams. Last year, Lions fans were up in arms about the offer of pick 2 for Tom Rockcliffe. Now, Rockcliffe and Beams are probably on par. I would put them on par in terms of their status as players. You can't expect Collingwood to say pick 4's fair for Dane Beams when we were saying pick 2's not even close for Tom Rockcliffe. Yeah. So, that's where I would love Dane Beams at the club, but I just don't know how you get it done.
Oh, I don't know how you get it done either. I guess what we do know is that the Lions have got an absolute bucket load of cash in the salary cap. They've paid under the salary cap this year, which under the new rules means they can pay over next year. There's also been the retirements of Jonathan Brown, Brent Maloney, Ash McGrath. A lot of cash has been saved up. I guess that's one thing we know. There's a bucket load of cash. We also know that the Lions are on the lookout. We know they want that A-grade talent, and as you mentioned, Dane Beams fits right into that category. He is prime talent. I think he's the same age as Tom Rockcliffe.
Yep.
24. Yep. He's been in the system for 6 years.
Same draft class as Rockcliffe, Redden, and Rich.
Bona fide A-grade talent, Dane Beams. So those things line up. I also think what we've learnt in the last couple of years is that if the Lions do have a bit of interest, which it seems they do, these bigger deals, which this one would have to be, take a bit of time. I think you've got to put in a bit of groundwork. I don't know how public they'd like to make it, but we know that the Lance Franklin deal took 12 months or so to unfold, and certain other, the big deals take time. You've got to put some groundwork in, don't you? But I'm a bit with you. So that all lines up. It all makes perfect sense, and I'm pretty sure there's some genuine interest there. And I know there's been some potential contracts bandied around, which we don't, there's no real need to speculate on here. But that's the big question. How can you possibly get that deal done? Dane Beams has got 1 year left on his contract, which means you have to trade for him. And he's in 2 years' time, he's a free agent, which is maybe, to me, if I'm looking from the outside, that's the time I'd look to go.
Yeah, do you think Collingwood would sign him on a 1 year extension, though?
Well, if they sign him on an extension, it obviously means that Dane's not that keen to come, does it? Like, if he's that keen to come...
That's true. I guess I'm just thinking, so you're saying target him in his free agency year, and I think that would mean to get to that stage, he'd need a 1 year extension at Collingwood.
No, I see what you mean. Yeah,
do you think they'd be happy? Because I think if he signs a 1 year extension, it's pretty clear that he has some intentions.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But I guess what we have to look at is Brisbane's got a lot of money. I don't think you have to give up the world for Dane just at the moment anyway. So I guess like your point's very good there. So I guess it's either this year or next year, or we see what happens. He has to sign a multi-year deal, as you rightly point out there. So what would you give for Dane Beams?
Well, obviously...
Not just what would you give, but it's if you're Collingwood... I mean, if I'm Collingwood and I've got a 24-year-old midfielder that is absolute elite talent, inside, outside, kicks goals...
Brownlow chance.
Brownlow material.
Yeah.
There is no way I'm giving up Dane Beams for anything. If they give up Dane Beams, they're basically admitting to we're rebuilding.
Yeah.
And Collingwood's not going to... And Collingwood... Let's not go over the history of Collingwood and Brisbane. Eddie Maguire is not a...
good Lord, could you imagine, Eddie, if we took Dane Beams?
Could you imagine what would you have to give up? In all seriousness, what if you're Collingwood, they're going to demand the world. And I don't think Brisbane's in a position to give the world.
Probably deservedly so, demand the world. I mean, if
I would.
Yeah, exactly. If we had a player like, for example, Tom Rockcliffe, if someone wanted Tom Rockcliffe, we would be demanding the world, and rightfully so, right back. So... I do think next year's the bigger chance. It's a lot of fun. That's the trade period. But I think next year's the bigger chance when he's off contract.
I think you're right. I mean, after we've spoken through it now, I think you're right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably for it to happen this year, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen this year. You know, you never know what might end up unfolding. But for it to happen, I feel like we need to obviously not just trade our first round draft pick, but also one of our better players, whether it's a young player or whoever.
I don't think a young player. I think it has to be an elite player that Brisbane's got.
So you don't think maybe a pick 4 and a Lewis Taylor would get the deal done?
Possibly.
It's not at all something I want to trade. Because this is the point I'm making. As much as on paper, Collingwood might accept something like that.
No, I don't think it would get it done actually. But
okay.
yeah, but it's
potential.
Think about it. You think about it. Yeah.
I guess you can't help but look back to the off season of 2009-2010 when Favola was bandied about coming up here, and Bradshaw and Riscatelli found themselves at Carlton. And the mess that caused, not just to personal relationships, but to the club culture. You can't just be trading... Like, it's not like a game of chess. You can't... Like, these are people. You can't just be trading out a player who's been loyal to the club for years and expect it's going to have no impact on club culture. It's
delicate, isn't it? Because we've talked about just earlier on this show that I think that was the number one thing out of this year. That was my number one thing anyway, is the retention of players and the building of the culture. So... you walk a very fine line here when you come to dealing with players, and we're not saying for a second that Brisbane's even contemplated doing that at the moment. I mean, this is very, very...
Oh, yeah. It's all hypothetical.
It's all hypothetical. It's all such early stages about... And having an interest in a player versus doing something about it is... They're worlds apart at the moment, but it's a very fine line. It's a balancing act, isn't it? Because you don't want anyone's name to get dropped in the media, or because, you're right, it affects culture and... And, you just don't want those little whispers getting around not only the change room, but the wider community.
I've just realised now that people are going to say, I heard Dom found the Fancast mention Louis Taylor might be in a trade. So, oh dear, that could be troublesome.
That won't happen.
I think that's guaranteed. You mentioned something about that in the text. We were texting about this earlier in the week, and you mentioned, I think you said exactly that, after many years of struggling with it, the Lions have just got a good culture back. Yep. You'd be an idiot to trade it away now and to I guess, jeopardise that.
So sorry, mate. I guess the thing is, for me, there's a lot of money available, and it's probably burning a hole in your wallet at the moment. The Lions want to spend it, and if you can get a guy like Beams and you can front end his contract, and it's all a great setup, and that's the way. But I don't think it's, and I'm sure the Lions don't think as well, that it's do it at all costs this season. We don't know what's going to happen in 12 months' time. Like, things might change, players might... We don't know what will happen. Things can certainly change a lot. So I don't think there's any urgency to do anything this off-season, because the way I look at it, at the moment, Brisbane aren't contending for finals in 2015. So I don't think there's an urgency to bring in that type of talent just yet. But I think maybe the following year you might start looking at pushing for finals when those mature sort of midfielders or mature forwards can help you take that next step. Because at the moment, I think Rich, Redden and Rockcliffe, they're all 24. They'll be 25 next year. They're in their 7th year. That's some experience for me. Pierce Hanley's in the same bracket. So I think there's enough there for another year. And I would think the big plays come at the end of next year when you're hoping to take the leap in 2016 towards the finals.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. We're hoping to get the general manager of footy operations and also has a list management role now too, Dean Warren, on the show in the next week.
It's on the air now.
Yeah, we'll put it there now. It's going to have to happen. Do you reckon he'll give us any answers on this?
Come on, Dino.
Might see if we can run that by him. Also on Pierce Hanley, don't have much time to talk about it, but might be worthwhile running by him. The talk that Pierce Hanley's younger brother might be on the radar for the club as a rookie selection has been, I think Lee Matthews spoke about it in a Friday night telecaster quite recently. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. I think there might be some underwhelmed fans this season if we don't make a single trade, which is very possible. But ultimately, I think
they'll take the fans will take an no trade as far better than last year.
Absolutely. I think in summary, I think it's just nice to be spoken about it as a bit of a destination again, rather than a place everyone.
It is.
wanted
We've
to
just
leave.
wasted 10 minutes talking about it, so it's good, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we will be back in the next week or two with another edition of the Fancast, hopefully joined by Dean Warren or someone of a similar ilk, and we can talk about some more of these kinds of things. Until then, though, this is the Brisbane Lions Fancast. Goodbye.